All right, yes, I'd also like to say welcome and thank you to the Harvard Libertarian Club for hosting this debate on free speech and minority dissent. It's a great privilege for me to be hosting it. But all four of us are, in a sense, minorities. None of us are US citizens, so we're in foreign lands, even though some of us live here now. And I think it's very fitting that today's debate take place in the Boston area, because in 1860, events took place not very far from here that are directly relevant to our discussion. So on 3rd December 1860, abolitionists held an anti-slavery meeting at the Tremont Temple about 5 miles from here. But that meeting was violently disrupted by white businessmen who feared that abolitionist talk would disrupt their business opportunities in the South. And so they violently disrupted and heckled this anti-slavery meeting. Present at that meeting was none other than Frederick Douglass, who was a runaway slave, but also one of the most famous abolitionists, an author, and a strong proponent of freedom. And Douglass was so upset by not being allowed to speak at this meeting, and that it was disrupted with impunity, that he penned a very famous speech called A Plea for Free Speech in Boston. In it, he said, among other things, that slavery cannot tolerate free speech. And he finished with these words, which I'd like to quote: "A man's right to speak does not depend upon where he was born or upon his color. The simple quality of manhood is the solid basis of the right, and there let it rest forever." But today, many of those who fight for equality and non-discrimination have strayed from Douglas' view. 40% of American millennials think that the government should be able to censor statements that are offensive to minorities. We've seen numerous cases where anti-racist activists have disrupted speakers they perceive to be racist or offensive on colleges and campus. So with us to discuss whether free speech is an ally or enemy of minority rights, we have an outstanding panel. They've already been introduced, so there's no need for me to do that again. I'm going to let each speaker have 10 minutes for opening remarks. Then we'll have a 30-minute discussion among the panelists, and then we'll open up for a Q&A with each and every one of you. I very much hope that you will contribute with your best arguments and critical reflections on this important subject. The order will be Faisal, Flemming, and Mustafa. So without further ado, Faisal, the floor is yours. 10 minutes, and I'm timing.
Hello, everyone. On April 2003, the United States invaded my home country of Iraq with the claim that removing a dictator like Saddam Hussein will directly result in a Jeffersonian democracy in the Middle East. Well, that didn't work well. The country went into a civil war and chaos, and minorities started fleeing the country due to persecution. In 2003, the Christian population of Iraq estimated at 1.4 million. In 2016, they become 275,000. So you do the math. I mean, my ancestors are very algebra, but I suck at math as well. The Yazidi population fell by 200,000, which is not a big minority anyway. The Mandean population, which is a religion that believes in John the Baptist, was a figure just like Jesus, decreased by 90%. Iraq now is ruled by a Shia Islamist government and Sunni Muslims who make up the minority in the country by comparison to Syria, in which Sunni Muslims make up the majority, and ruled Iraq since its inception after World War I. And those who had some relationships with Saddam's regime have been facing persecution, and many of them left the country. What the Americans forgot and did not understand that to build any form of democracy, with giving the people the right to vote is not enough. Minority rights, protecting of minority views and unpopular opinions or beliefs from ruling majority population or government are a central piece of building a democracy. Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, he said, freedom of conscience, of education, of speech and assembly are among the very fundamentals of democracy. And all of them would be nullified should the freedom of press can be successfully challenged. In Saddam's Iraq, we had freedom of speech if you never criticize Saddam Hussein. And now, and you can criticize America, you can criticize Israel, capitalism, but that's pretty much it. And in today's Iraq, we have freedom of speech too, but terms and conditions apply. That if you criticize any militia or you criticize any Now there's a militia called the PMF, and others, if you criticize them, you might be killed by a militia. What is sometimes unfortunately forgotten is that free speech is not about protecting views held by the majority, but it's about protecting the minorities and minorities within minorities and unpopular opinions. And what we also sometimes forget is there are differences between minorities as well. One of my favorite jokes is that if you ask two rabbis, they give you three opinions. And while we sometimes look at minorities as one monolithic group with one point of view, as sometimes happens in representation, is that we want the Muslim representative, the Christian representative, the atheist representative, etc. There are minorities within minorities, and sometimes these minorities are the first victims of their own community. So let's go back for Iraq for a bit, where I'm from, and I've witnessed the war. I lived in Iraq in 2009 and 2009. And while many people look at Islam as they think that the first enemy is the West, in fact, the first enemy of Islamists are the people who live within that region and people who they fear are going to change things from within. People like Mustafa Akyol, who is an Iraqi parliamentarian secularist. Al-Qaeda was managed to kill his two sons and stopped by many assassinations. Some of the first targets were also cultural Muslims, people who identify with the faith but not necessarily believe in the theology, closer to a secular Jew in the West, liberal Muslims, LGBT Muslims, feminist Muslims, and people who are fighting the status quo from within are those who are the first victims of persecution because they're viewed as traitors for the status quo. And for that reason, these minorities within minorities, in my opinion, need the most protection. So, how much time do I have?
6 minutes.
So you mentioned, as Jacob mentioned at the end, about the concept of protecting minority views, is that I want to add something very important happening in this country, and which is about censoring views that are viewed as bigoted in the name of pseudo-multiculturalism. And what's happening is that they are intentionally trying to confuse human beings who are Muslims, people who happen to be Muslims or Christians, with their ideas, and they think that both of them deserve equal protection. And in my opinion, I call bullshit on that. I would say that humans have rights, cultures and traditions and beliefs don't, and they should be up to debate, discussion, and criticism. So any idea should be up to all debates, and respecting human rights is more important, in my opinion, than respecting their ideas. Humans have rights, cultures, beliefs don't have rights, and they evolve or devolve, in some cases that we have seen in the United States, with the human experience. And I would go further in saying that you cannot be a bigot against a set of ideas or any ideology. Bigotry is towards people and not ideas or a set of ideas or any ideology. So if an idea cannot stand up scrutiny, or maybe it's probably a bad idea, or maybe it doesn't have the answers to everything as it claims. So to end my introduction is with a quote with Salman Rushdie. As you probably know, he had the persecution from a fatwa from Ayatollah Khomeini, not somebody is now the new one. It's hard to differentiate, but both start with Shahs, that's great. Even though for Arabic speaker, that's easy for me. He said that the moment you say that any idea system is sacred, whether it's a religious belief or a secular ideology, the moment you declare a set of ideas to be immune from criticism, satire, and contempt, freedom of thought becomes impossible. Thank you very much.
I think this may be one of the first times in the history of debates that speaking has actually finished almost 50% ahead of time. So, but very well done.
So we have more time there?
I'll save you some time.
Flemming?
Thank you. If I speak as fast as Faisal, I may be finished in 2 minutes. I want to thank the Critical Thinking Unit program for inviting me, and Ideas Beyond Borders, and the Ayaan Foundation. It's nice to be here. Free speech has never been popular because, as George Orwell said, it implies the right to tell people what they do not want to hear, and who are fond of that. In many ways, free speech goes against human nature, and so does tolerance. That is our capacity to listen to speech that we dislike or hate without resorting violence, threats, or intimidation. To appreciate the benefits of free speech, we need education, practice, and cultural freedom that is being nurtured on a daily basis. Last year, the magazine Commentary asked if free speech is under threat in the US, to which one of the respondents replied, yes, of course, free speech is always under threat, because it's not only the single most successful idea in all of human history, it is also the single most counterintuitive. Tonight we are debating why free speech matters to minorities. It matters a great deal. In fact, I think it's one of the key reasons why it's important to defend free speech. And in a moment, I'll explain why. But before I do that, I want to say a few words about identity, minorities, and power. Identity, that is, having a sense of who we are, where we come from, is fundamental to human beings, independent on culture, religion, and ethnicity. Identity implies a sense of belonging, family, friends, religion, nation, village, peers, colleagues, sport clubs, and so on and so forth. Being excluded, feeling marginalized, and lonely is painful to all of us, though some may be better to cope with it than others. It's important to stress that human beings have many identities. We are not only one thing, and we do not belong exclusively to a single community, though some of our identities are of greater importance to us than others. If a community, a group of people, or an institution try to reduce our identity to just one thing, we should be on guard. This is the stuff tribalism, aggressive nationalism, and fanaticism are made of. It undermines pluralism and social cohesion. We not only are more than one identity, it's also the case that our identities aren't fixed once and for all. They change over time depending on the choices we make, what we do, where we live, and our interactions with other people. I want to say a couple of words about minorities and power as well. Within the humanities, it's popular to reduce all human interaction and relationships to questions of power and privilege. Everything is about power, and you cannot have a meaningful conversation about free speech and other fundamental rights until you have rectified distortions of power distribution. I agree that powers matter a lot. That's obvious. I'm not sure if power either is something you have or haven't once and for all. If you belong to a minority, you surely have little power in many situations. But in some situations, you may have more power than people belonging to the majority. In some settings, an individual is part of a minority group. In others, he or she belongs to the majority. As a Dane in the US, I belong to a minority, as Jacob said, while in Denmark, I belong to the majority. As a non-believer in the US, I belong to a minority that would never stand a chance to be elected president, while being a non-believer probably is a majority point of view in Denmark. So why is free speech important to minorities? It's a widely held belief among minorities that freedom of speech is nothing more than a cover for the majority's right to mock and abuse them without legal consequences. There may be serious and profound grounds for this impression, but I think it's wrong. Why? Well, if you look at history and the fate of minorities and oppressed groups and their struggle for rights across time, continents, and cultures, the reality is that free speech often is minorities and oppressed people's strongest weapon. Why is that? Because oppressed and marginalized minorities by definition do have little power. Powerful majorities that are allowed to implement restrictions on speech inevitably will do so to guard the status quo from dissent and disruption. Without free speech, the authorities can easily silence minorities and dissenting voices. This happened in the 19th century, as Jacob said, to the abolitionists who fought slavery, and it happened to the civil rights movements in the middle of the 20th century. In the Soviet Union, it happened to ethnic minorities and religious minorities, and it is happening right now to religious minorities in China, Russia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and many more authoritarian and unfree countries where there is no very limited protection of speech. Free speech is also a tool for securing other rights for minorities, including the right to equal treatment before the law. Let me remind you that free speech rights were high on the agenda of the civil rights movement in the US. All across the segregated South, thousands of Black Americans went to jail protesting segregation, and many of those who went to on the ground, they were violating injunctions against protesting and other unconstitutional restrictions on speech. That is, they were denied their First Amendment rights. Granting majorities the right to determine when speech is harmful and when to censor it only invites further oppression. It's easy to think of the civil rights movement as a campaign against segregation, which certainly what it was, but it was also a campaign for the full spectrum of rights, including freedom of expression. I want to tell a story from today's Netherlands that illustrates why minorities should be careful what they wish for when they support hate speech laws. A couple of years ago, the Dutch politician Geert Wilders was convicted for hate speech against Moroccans during an election campaign in the Netherlands. Fine, supporter of hate speech laws would say. However, if Wilders were to get a majority in the Dutch parliament, and that cannot be excluded, he would like to use the very same hate speech laws against the Muslim community in the Netherlands and ban the Quran. It means that it only takes a different political majority to turn laws intended to protect minorities against those very same minorities. Finally, I would say it's crucial to keep in mind that the most important minority in any society is individual. It is the individual that enjoys rights, not nation states, religions, certain versions of history, or cultures. Too often, we tend to focus on groups, not on individuals. We let imams speak on behalf of Muslim communities without having a democratic mandate to do so. We look at minorities as if they constitute homogeneous groups with uniform opinions. That's not the case. There is a diversity of opinion and ways of life within minority communities. In doing so, we betray the minority within the minority, the individuals within the community that do not conform to the dominating social norms on issues of faith, sexuality, politics, relationships between men and women, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about minorities, we should not forget the most important minority in any society is the individual. And if you want to stand up for minorities, there is no better way to do so than defending the rights of the individual. Thank you.
Mustafa, the floor is yours.
Can I use more than 10 minutes?
Donate from Iraqi-born.
Thanks so much, brother. Well, let me begin by telling you a personal story. Last September, I went to Malaysia for a series of lectures. I went to Malaysia 6 times in the past 9 years for conferences there. Because there are Muslim liberal groups, particularly an organization called the Islamic Renaissance Fund. So these are Islamic liberals. And by liberals, I don't mean secular, they're believing Muslims who want to re-articulate, reinterpret the faith in a more liberal, let's say, outlook. And I had translated my book, Islamic Muslim Liberty, into Malay before. So the Malay edition was already out there. They invited me to a few events, additional conference. And I went from all the way from Malaysia to Malaysia, which is the other end of the planet. And one of the panels were titled, "Does freedom of conscience open the floodgates of apostasy?" And I'm a defender of freedom of conscience as well as freedom of speech. Religious freedom, freedom of speech are my issues, right? And apostasy, though, is a concept that is interesting. I mean, it's seen as a crime, not in the Quran, but in classical jurisprudence in Islam. It's seen as a crime punishable by execution, by death penalty. And that is implemented in Saudi Arabia. I mean, apostasy means you're changing your religion or leaving your religion. Apostasy is, in that sense, punished by death penalty in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Sudan, a few other places like 11 Muslim majority countries, not majority, but 11. And Malaysia is not one of those, and the Malaysians are moderate. They take pride in being moderate. So they don't execute apostates. They send him to a rehabilitation center. So in my speech, which is like half an hour lecture, it's available on the web, I argued against it. I said, well, wouldn't Muslims to leave their religion? Yes, of course, we can advise and give some ideas, but if they still want to change it, it's their choice. You shouldn't send them to a rehabilitation center. And I brought the arguments from the Quran, from the interpretation of jurisprudence. I refer to the Islamic authorities, also their progressive scholars, like Rashid Al-Mushi from Tunisia. And at the end, I said, religion is not something you can please, something in the heart. And the event ended, and everybody left, and then 5 serious guys came and they said, "We are the religion police." So they showed me their identity cards, and their job description was religion enforcement officer. Wow. So they said they heard complaints about the talk, they watched the video, they asked me questions, and they said, "We'll watch the video and let you know," and they let go that day. And I had my Malay food and had good sleep, and I woke up. The next day I woke up and it was on the national news that I was summoned to the religious police headquarters. It's called Jabi. And my advisor suggested that I should better leave the country as soon as possible because these guys are, they said we'll through with lawyers and so on and so forth. And I went to the airport, I gave my passport and I was thinking, I'll have my sparkling water or something. And the police stopped me and they said, "There's a problem." So they take me to the airport police station. And I was waiting there. There were secular police who arrested me. And they were like, "You're famous." They were taking photos with me or something. They didn't. But then the religion police came. They were more serious. And they said, "We will going to read you your arrest order. Are you going to cooperate?" I said, "Do I have options?" Yeah. And they said, "You have violated the law for teaching Islam without tawliyah, which is permission from the authorities. And the punishment for that is 3 years in jail. So we will be taken to a Sharia court tomorrow. And now we are going to arrest you for that." I was like, I just came here for conference and just going home. It was shock. And they took me from the airport, took me to a few different places, and ultimately they locked me that night at the religion police headquarters. That was the first time in my life I heard the Quran. I'm a Muslim, and it sounded threatening and oppressive because it was the religion police. You're hearing that. Anyway, the next morning they took me to the Sharia court. They questioned me for 2 hours. At the end, they let me go, and I was able to leave the country in 4 hours. Here, they let me go. I later learned that it was possible through some diplomacy. My father told Turkey's former president, not Erdogan, the one before that, and he's a good friend of the Malay Sultan. He called the Malay Sultan, and the Sultan told the court to release him. So I was like, go thank you to that, but it could have been longer. And they were so obsessed with me quoting the Quran. There was a small part of a verse in the Quran, La ikraha fid din, which means no compulsion in religion. So, I mean, that's the kind of the liberal motto, the liberal Islamic motto. You write it on the wall, no compulsion in religion, against all the Islamic authoritarians, right? I kept quoting the verse, so they were so angry at me for quoting the Quran without permission. And then before getting on the plane, I checked how they interpret the verse. And I entered their website, and still, I mean, you can check jakim.org, jakim.my. And in English translation, they do exactly what the Saudis do. No compulsion in religion is edited with parentheses and a few words in there. So no compulsion in religion becomes no compulsion in religion while accepting Islam. So no compulsion in religion to make you enter the religion. But once you enter, like Hotel California, you can't never you can never leave. Right? And also you have to be in it, plus the religion police has authority over it. So they can punish you for drinking more Ramadan. So that's the logic of what I call Islamic authoritarianism, which is pretty mainstream in classical jurisprudence. But now against that, people have been arguing, and we refer to, of course, Quran and reinterpretation and other things. But the point was that I was not a secular atheist condemning Islam. No, I'm not. I'm a Muslim. I'm proud of that. I'm an Islamic reformer or liberal, and I was making an argument from the Quran, and they were making an argument from the Quran as well. So this is also what is going on in the Muslim world today. There are secular, of course, critiques of religion. There are like all kind of very anti-clerical voices. I respect what they do, I agree or disagree, whatever. But also there are these kind of people who try to change, bring change within. And that is actually sometimes a bigger problem for them. And I mean, I'm lucky I just got saved by 18 hours of detention in Malaysia, but we have so many examples in the past couple of decades of people killed, executed for apostasy, although they're not actually apostates. I mean, they are still proud Muslims, they offer a different interpretation. In Sudan, for example, Mahmoud Taha was executed in 1985. He just offered a different reading of the Quran. He was a pious Islamic scholar. He just said, Quran's legal verses are more historical, the theological message is more universal, let's focus on that. So he just made the theory upside down. There's a theory of abrogation, so he just made it go upside down. They executed him for that in 1985. In Egypt, Nasser Abu Zaid, an important Islamic scholar, again, he offered a reading of the Quran by more seeing the context of it and understanding that it's more contextual. God is saying something, in that society it made sense that way, we should re-understand it today. That's the kind of basic liberal argument. And he was condemned as an apostate. In Egypt, they don't kill apostates, but still he was under threat. The Egyptian authorities forced him to divorce his wife. Because if you're an apostate, your wife is Muslim, you can't stay married. I mean, because Muslim women are not allowed to marry non-Muslim men. So the man, Nasser Abu Zaid and his wife fled Egypt in 1995. They could be vigilante attacks or something. And silently, years later, they returned back and he silently died there. But he had to shut down. Now, and that is the thing, and one more thing. And this is all happening. There is obviously Islamic authoritarianism, and you have seen that in the attacks of that. And of course, some people see this religion as oppressive, and secular ideas will say this. I respect that, but I'm saying, well, we actually can reinterpret religion, and it has happened in Christianity through the Enlightenment. And I think it is beginning to happen in Islam, and that's why there's so much rage against Muslim reformists or liberals by these people. One more thing. After I left Malaysia, my book was banned by the government. Actually, the Vice Prime Minister declared that Mustafa Akyol's book is banned in Malay and English editions in both.
What a marketing.
Sorry?
What a marketing.
Marketing, although, I mean, still, I don't know how the sales in Malaysia are doing, but I mean, it's banned. It helps, I mean, at least, obviously there. And he didn't say this guy is a heretic, and he didn't say, quote the hadith. He said he's disrupting the harmony of Malay society. So is harmony a bad thing? No, harmony is a nice thing we should all like. I mean, harmony is not a bad thing, but it's a liberal value, maybe. But I was disrupting the harmony of Malay, like I was disrupting, because basically I was saying, if Malays change their religion and become Christians or atheists, that's fine. That disrupts the Malay order because the Malay constitution says Malays are Muslim. So constitutionally, an ethnic Malay is defined as a Muslim. So the Malay changing the faith disrupts their harmony because the harmony they understand is a blueprint imposed on society by authorities. And when people do these things, they sometimes find examples in the West, not the exact same thing, but say, oh, the West does the same thing too. Is everything allowed in the West? Can you say everything allowed in the West as well? No, these are banned. They do what I call whataboutism. So that's why the level of freedom of speech and freedom in general in the West is important. Because if it lowers here a little bit, others will get the idea and they will multiply it by 5. And I see that, for example, just one more minute. I see this in Turkey today, for example. Today, Turkey is in a crisis with free speech and everything. The Turkish government, for example, recently arrested people who said no to war on Twitter. Turkish government is fighting against Kurdish militants that Turkey considers as terrorists. Okay, that's whatever. Opposing that in itself became pro-terrorist propaganda. And of course, it's ridiculous, but there's whataboutism. The Turkish authorities say, oh, we know in France, people who are sympathetic to ISIS were saying something on that are arrested. So this is our terrorists. So, and they, of course, exaggerate and amplify the example, but they sometimes find examples. That's why I believe for protecting freedom in the world, there needs to be a lot of battle in non-Western parts of the world, which are mostly not as liberal, obviously, as well. But within the West, it's important because if the barrier lowers down in the West, it will go down much more faster in other parts of
the world. Concludes the opening remarks. We'll have around 30 minutes discussion among you. I think if we address here should we say Western audience, most people would say yes, there needs to be free speech, but when we draw the limit, let's for instance take the events in Charlottesville, where you had Ku Klux Klan members, Nazis, some of them are coming with the most vile, hateful messages. Does free speech does it really protect? Does it really protect minorities? Is it important for minorities to allow even such a degree of free speech that you have hooded members of the Ku Klux Klan or people with swastika standing in front of a synagogue? Couldn't you make an argument that the European approach here would be better here, that these people would be arrested, they would be convicted for free speech? This European countries don't have
But I think, in fact, that Charlottesville is a bad example because, as you said, they were armed, and they were out to fight, and
okay, but
they were there
let's take away the guns and just talk about the swastikas.
I think that's a different story because I would contrast Charlottesville 2017 with Skopje 1977. In Skopje 1977, you had U.S. American neo-Nazis marching, wanting to march through a town inhabited by Holocaust survivors, and the Skopje Nazis were in fact defended by Ayaan. Then I think he was chief lawyer of the CLU at that time, himself a survivor from the Holocaust. And he said, I'm not doing this because I'm some kind of Jesus figure or idealistic. It's because I think that my rights as a Jew and as a child of the Holocaust victims is best served by protecting the right of protecting this kind of speech. And I think that's exactly true. I mean, it is. I think I mean, I'm not saying that there are no dilemmas, and what I was trying to say in my remarks is that it takes a culture of freedom of speech to be able to manage this kind of bigoted speech without resorting to violence and other unconstitutional things. But I would defend these people's right to hate speech as long as it does not transgress into specific code to violence and violence.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's really a slippery slope. Is that when you start censoring what sometimes considered bad ideas from the majority? Imagine, let's say, for example, in this case, Germany, I mean, they have now a significant amount of Muslim refugees. Let's say in maybe 50 years, the majority and the minority flips, in which the Muslims become the majority and white Germans, let's say, ethnic Germans become minority. Then would you now ban, let's say, the Muslim Brotherhood? Or so like it's generally like it starts with. I mean, generally these like hate speech laws start with good intentions, in my opinion, about protecting minorities, but then it eventually goes to a slippery slope in which everything starts to become censored. And also back to the point about protecting minorities within minorities. Let's say in some bills, I think Canada was trying to pass a bill or a motion of the Islamophobia bill. That we cannot. I mean, according to my interpretation, it's like you cannot criticize Islam or Islamism. How about the eternal debate that is happening within the Muslim community about criticizing Islam? And then when you say criticizing Islam is not allowed, because Islam is not allowed, then this law will probably be affecting the Muslims who are trying to reform their religion, trying to change it from within. So obviously, I think like to test someone's principles of defending free speech is to take the most extreme example and see if they were willing to stand for the people that the values they despise. And as long as there is no direct call to violence, then in my opinion, everything should be permissible. And with having with some hate speech laws, and we're seeing the case in sometimes Germany, is that it starts with the Holocaust and doesn't end there. And I think I'm very worried of this future in Europe. I think the United States. And one thing they might have got it right is probably freedom of speech.
but you said that ideas and religions don't have rights, humans have rights, and a lot of people will say, well, then Muslims should have the right not to be subjected to anti-Muslim bigotry. I mean, if you conceive that ideas should not be protected, but people should be protected, why not protect people from anti-Muslim bigotry?
Well, I mean, there is a clear line, in my opinion, between anti-Muslim bigotry and criticism of ideas. I mean, Muslims as individuals, and I agree with Flemming that the individual is the most minority. And individuals who happen to be Muslims have as right as anyone else, and the right to be protected from violence is there. But the idea that someone holds is not protected. They should be so I think that's where sometimes the confusion is being made, especially with the term Islamophobia, is that sometimes it's defined as criticism of Islam and Muslims. I mean, there's no other, like if you look at the Republican Party, nobody says you should only criticize Republicans. There's no like that. Like it's okay to criticize Republican values without being accused of hatred of Muslims. That is, I think, so Muslims have the right as any human being to have the right to have their own religion, have the right to have their own ideas. But that doesn't mean they should be sheltered from any form of criticism. And I think, now like me watching media in the East and the West, I would say that the discussion about Islam in Arab-speaking media right now, especially after the rise of ISIS, is far more open than what I see here in the West. It's like in Arab, you can see people criticizing Islam openly on television, or playing some versions of it. They don't have a fear of being called bigot, but I mean, it's obviously a parameter of the country. So, but I would say that it's a discussion are much more honest. Here, everybody's trying to tiptoe. Is that okay? I'm going to criticize this, but I don't want to sound like sometimes it's Islamophobia. It's like the fear of being perceived as Islamophobic. So Muslims have rights, to have their own beliefs and ideas themselves, should be open to criticism. Islam itself is a monolithic religion. Sometimes different Muslims agree with each other or disagree with each other. So Muslims have the right to believe, but doesn't mean that that belief cannot criticize or deal with.
But sometimes, as a liberal believing Muslim, you get caught between a rock and a hard place because you get arrested in Malaysia and conservative authoritarian Muslims are after you, and at the same time you get Europeans who are very critical of Islam, who will say Taqiyya or whatever. They will say that you can't.
I'm going to call it Trojan horse of Islam in the West.
Yes, exactly. They will insist that you might sound liberal, but your real agenda is to impose Sharia.
I got that. Plus, for example, funny, in Wellesley College, where I'm now, right a week before going to Malaysia, I had given a lecture titled "Was Islam Compatible with Freedom?" And I was criticized by a few Wellesley students and professors that the title sounds Islamophobic. Because I'm hurting the Muslim students. Of course it is compatible. Is there a question about that? Well, there is a question about that, and I saw it in Malaysia. I said, well, I'm going to Malaysia and I'll talk about that. And trust me, there are some people who think they are not. In Malaysia, they condemn liberalism and human rights-ism. Officially, these concepts are condemned by the authorities. So they see it as an ideology which has to be denied. So obviously, those people think they are not compatible. So in the West, I think, the discussion about Islam is polarized and both sides. One left liberal response, which is, of course, there's no problem. Everything is the same. We're all the same. They're just hatred against Muslims, and it's not that simple. And on the right, of course, there are the people who want to see all Islam in a broad brush and deny that there are nuances within it, and wants to see that the best Muslim is Al Qaeda, and all others are Trojan horses. That's nonsense too. So I think a more nuanced discussion about Islam is needed. But to the question that you raised, I agree with the basic idea. Threats, death threats. An incitement to violence and a kind of narrative which says violence is coming to you. That's, I think, a crime. If I'm waiting in front of a church with a machine gun and I'm ready to kill the church, that would threaten them. So I do see a difference between incitement to violence or direct threats of violence, but that is different from hurting the feelings of those people with some ideas that I'm sharing. So that is becoming sometimes bad, and I don't accept that. People should have all the right to say whatever they think about Prophet Muhammad and criticize him, and as a Muslim, I should hear what they're saying and respond to that, or even maybe not want to discuss that, but that should itself not be a crime. Or similarly, for example, and this is a big whataboutism example, Holocaust denial laws in Europe. Iranians make a big deal about that because they say, "Oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech." We see how it is. It is interesting. For example, I'm coming from Turkey. In Turkey, if you say 1915, what happened to the Armenians in the year 1915 was a genocide, now it is relaxed a little bit, but you could be arrested or sued for that. And so saying it wasn't. And in France, they tried to pass a law. Luckily, the French Constitutional Court, or whatever it's called, Supreme Court, blocked that. But the Sarkozy took there to say it wasn't to have been. So now, your opinions. The Armenians obviously suffered a huge tragedy, maybe genocide, whatever you call it. I'm not an expert on that. But people should be able to say what they're saying about this. That in itself should be criminalized. Or you're saying views that offend our people or hurt their feelings. That should not ever be criminalized. But there can be speech, like if you walk around saying, "I'm going to kill these Jews or Muslims or blacks or Mormons," and that I think is a legal matter, because that really violates those people's right to exist without fear in society.
But I think context is important, because you may say things like that on the internet. People sit at home and they write outrageous things that can be perceived as a real threat. But I think that's different from being in Charlottesville and say, now we are going to go and kill the blacks or the community. So I think I think context is important, and then there is a definition. I mean, one man's bigotry is another man's poetry.
Bigotry is not a criminal concept. It's a social concept.
It's. I mean, you need a definition. I mean, there are clearly it is speech that is bigoted, and we should fight that. But I just don't think that the best way to fight it is by criminalizing it. If there are bigots in the room, I would like to know. I feel far more uncomfortable if there are bigots in the room and I don't know. So I would like to know how to behave and act in such a situation.
Flemming, more than a decade ago, you had a hand in the publication of some cartoons, which ignited a global debate all over the world about free speech. One of the things that struck me is you and I both lived through that. Maybe you obviously much more than I, but it was basically the center right in Denmark at the time, and also in Europe, who were very much saying the cartoons are about free speech. We have to never compromise. These are about Western civilization. This is the best part of Western civilization. We can never compromise. We have to be principled. Now, in Denmark, we have a center-right government that has introduced more restrictions on free speech than any other government since World War II. And in practice, all of these restrictions are aimed at Muslims. So this is
aimed at protecting?
No, aimed at limiting. So
targeting
Muslims. So hate preach. If you're a hate preacher, if you're a preacher, and you expressly condone illegal acts, including polygamy, you could go to jail for 3 years. There's a list of hate preachers who are not allowed to travel into the country, and now there's
so you say polygamy is fine, you go to jail.
If you say the Quran says polygamy is mandated, and I believe that's a good thing, you could go to jail. That hasn't been anything, and there's a ban now against the niqab and the book, which obviously also raises religious expression issues, however much money we get.
Now that goes to circumcision.
Yeah.
There are some who wants to,
which may not be speech, but how do you see that change? I mean, to me, it's been one of the greatest disappointments about that. I mean, all the people that you and I, would talk about free speech now have completely turned around, and their arguments sound exactly like the liberal left 10 years ago. How do you see that?
I mean, you are right now doing a wonderful podcast about the history of free speech. And, if you look at the history of free speech, and if you look at Denmark now, it's a classical case. And I would say that, I don't know about you, but I have lost a lot of my illusions over the past 10 years. That you and I really belong to a very small minority in Denmark who are willing to defend, also the rights of people who don't like what we are saying. But I think that is a classical example. That's why I said that free speech has never been popular, and free speech in many ways go against human nature. I'm in favor of free speech, but only when it concerns my own opinions. I'm not willing to defend the rights of free speech of people with whom I disagree, or even ideas that I hate, and that is the test. And very few people passes that test, and that is what we are seeing in Denmark and other European countries. And I think it's very important here to keep in mind, also when we talk about minorities and bigoted speech, that free speech, the right to free speech, is indivisible. Either you have it or you don't. If you have it, it means you have to be willing to protect speech that is bigoted.
Let's go to the Muslim world. I mean, I don't like the term Muslim world because how do you define the Muslim world? obviously you've got a lot of countries from different continents and different branches of Islam and so on. But you're a religious, Faisal, you're a more heterodox in your
To say the least, yeah.
how do we ensure the promotion of, say, free speech, religious freedom in the Islamic world? What's the best strategy? Is it like you do from within? You think that it's religious, pious Muslims that have to take the fight, or is it maybe the non-believers, or is it an alliance? How do you see it?
Well, I think one of the effective means is to first show that, I mean, the point emphasized by Flemming that, well, Muslims may need free speech. And oh, I mean, I actually written about that. If you go to Denmark and they want to ban your ideas about polygamy, you will need it. What about Wilders comes to power? He will say, Quran has some hateful passages, so let's ban it. Oh, so this maybe free speech is something we need. So in one of my speeches in Malaysia, the one that I was able to do, I told them, do we Muslims ever like liberalism? I said, yeah, we like it a lot when we're a minority in the middle of Europe and we need to wear headscarves or burkinis, or, I mean, I personally don't wear them, but more conservative women want to wear them. Yes, we want to wear them. How do we defend that right? It's the individual. The state cannot interfere in the individual's dress. I mean, I hear that argument from Muslims who defend the right to wear the hijab in the French, for example, public square. That's great. I love that. I support that. But let's take that idea then to Saudi and to Iran too. So that's a principle. So pushing Muslims to understand that this is not something that they will always see, oh, the others need that. No, you may sometimes need that. So you have to think. That's one thing. The other thing is that to show that they also need free speech because there is no one interpretation of Islam. I mean, if you go, I was in actually a conference in Harvard last weekend, so there were the Shia Muslims complaining that there's no Shia mosque in Saudi Arabia, or maybe there are very remote ones and suppressed community. If you go to Iran, no, it's the Sunni community that's suppressed. So you need free speech for Muslims, yes, and depending on where they are, it can change. So that whole, and one thing I emphasize, like, who is the first person, what is the first person most famous in Islam, killed for, executed for apostasy? He was Gailan al-Dimakshi, a theologian who was executed by the Umayyad dynasty because he defended the idea of free will against predestination. And you know why predestination was very important for the rulers? Because the rulers were arguing that God has preordained everything, including our kingdom. So they were using predestination as a means to justify their power. So Gailan al-Dimakshi was a pious scholar who said, no, you are responsible for what you're doing. It's not God's fate. You are making the decision, so we'll judge you based on that. So that was declared as apostasy, well, heresy, and they executed for that. So this is where this all comes from. It's not even coming from God. It's coming from these interpreters of the religion who at some point wanted to get a crackdown on the position. So once you put all this, start to identify people. It's important, I think, to bring arguments from within the faith, rather than Salman Rushdie wants to write that book and say something. I mean, I defend his right to say that, but that in itself is not just enough. And to show that, you may need that, and maybe the ban is already coming from these kind of very temporal sources, not even from divine. So I think explaining those things sometimes helps.
And I would say it works in alliance. I mean, with the history of Christian enlightenment that happened in the West, there were multiple figures who were able to influence the Christian world, or who are not believers in that theology. And they're non-believers kind of very, one of my things that I've worked on is that I look at the Muslim model spectrum. You have 10 being ISIS and 0 being somebody with a cultural Muslim. And then you go toward conservatism. So you have non-violent Islamists, and you have violent Islamists who are jihadists, and then you have 5 to 0 who are being conservative, and then psycho-liberal, etc., etc. So Muslims belong to a large spectrum, and from 0 to 5, from people who are culturally Muslim to 5, they all, I think, have a role in modernizing the Islamic faith by working together. Now, there's kind of very little hope of working with ISIS. I think there's hardly a middle ground to be found. I mean, I don't know, like throwing gates from the 6th floor, not the 10th, maybe. But I mean, there are people that I think who belong to the violent Islamist.
It's too late for them.
Yeah, it's too late for them. But I think that, and for example, like, I mean, I'm familiar with theology as well. I've had multiple discussions with, I mean, that's part of my curiosity, you know, about religion. And I acknowledge that there are multiple interpretations of Islam. And for it comes to like free speech, I think there was an argument that's being used a lot by former Prime Minister of Iraq, Ayaan, who was himself a secularist, is that he goes to the Sunnis and tells them that if you support these values, that will protect you from the Shias. And then he goes to the Shias and tells them exactly the same. Look what happened when Sunnis were in power. So in a way is that I think one of the most successful ways, in my opinion, at least working in Iraq politics, and I'm very familiar with lots of politics there, is really appealing to people's self-interest and see how these values are actually protect their own self-interest. Free speech is good for Sunnis in Iraq, and it's good for Shias in Iran, Shias in Syria. And also convincing the majorities that these values actually can also benefit you as well. So, and that's have been kind of the success stories. I mean, Iraqi elections that happened, have elections happening this time in May, but we have election happened 4 years ago, and the Iraqi parliament was able to become slightly leaning to the secular. So the secular party got many votes by comparison to the others. And the reason is because they were inclusive of multiple factions of the Sunnis and Shias and Kurds and everything. And they were saying that these values of secularism and free speech being a fundamental of it is helping you.
Did they say secularism?
Well, we say civil
state.
Yeah, civil state, which is like, it's like not as subtle. It is the secularism, but
Secularism is a dirty word.
yeah, because unfortunately that's actually a very important point, is that secularism have been used a lot by some of the fascist dictators that ruled, so I mean, like Jamal Abdel Nasser and Saddam Hussein and others. Well, even though they never use it that much, but the term secularism has been with two things. Uncle Toms, quote unquote, coming from the West or trying to tell us what to do, and fascist dictators. So now, kind of as a PR move, is that some of the politicians are calling what's called civil state, which is for civil liberties, and that means separation of mosque and state, which is definitely the same. But and also like recently, Mustafa Sadr, who used to be one of the most, I would say, I'll put him in the violent Shia, and he was part of this Mahdi army that eventually like was responsible for killing lots of Sunnis. But he recently came out in support of civil state because it's kind of a status struggle. Is that if the theocracy is going to happen, he's not going to rule it. So he was like, okay, maybe
it won't be my theocracy.
Yeah, it won't be. Yeah, it's like quite FDR. It's like he's a son of a bitch, but he's not our son. So yes, I think back to the main point of like who can have the most influence. I think, I mean, for example, give you an example, the God Delusion, book written by Richard Dawkins, has been downloaded about 15 million times in Arabic, read by countries from Saudi Arabia and others. And I was having a conversation in Oklahoma with a Jordanian guy called Mohammed Khadra, and he was a Salafi-leaning Jordanian, and some of his colleagues joined Al-Qaeda, fought in Fallujah and Ramadi, all this stuff. And I'm very interested in what said, you totally change your mind. And then he said, because I was an extreme Salafist, I kind of needed a punch in the face. I needed some book that was so provocative to the way that breaking the glass ceiling, right? And he said that all these, with all due respect, just quoting, he said, like, all these reformers or these I see them as salespeople. I don't trust these people. They say that they're trying to say these cute things and all of that. I've always believed that Islam is XYZ, and then they're telling me no, it's not the case. So he made the argument that, and there was another case. This guy called Ahmed Habqan, who became a very famous video blogger in Egypt, and he was actually his brother joined ISIS, as far as I know, and they grew up in the same household, all extremism and everything. And he had also a similar argument. He said, I was so tied into the faith, to the way that no one was able to shake it except a punch in the face. Except that
Dawkins?
Yeah, I think Christopher Richard, Sam Harris, Christopher Richard, something like that. That of the translation.
They got persuaded?
The persuasion was not really the arguments, it was like your life is completely meaningless. They needed something like this, that all your belief system is bullshit. And that's actually what they needed, because they were so tied into the faith that much.
Did they have an impact on them?
Yeah, they did. So what I believe in, what I personally believe in, I'm following that in my organization, the Reporters, is really presents the Arab youth with as much diverse voices as possible. And some people might be receptive to Islam, but actually the term Daraba really actually doesn't mean hate, but it means, I don't know, smoke some weed. I don't know. But
That's about wife beating, by the way.
yeah, so like we might have like, I think that, I mean, the Muslim world, or Arab, I mean, I'm focusing on the Arab world because that's language, my safe space, language I speak, and most of my connections are there. Is that it's one of the youngest populations on the planet, and what can really work for them might be the set of all these ideas is to kind of like, okay, the moment you have make them with like they think of the world out of dogmatism. I think that there's not only one way of truth, but there might be different views that can be true at the same moment. I think that we will be heading to a much better direction.